Alex Thompson stood in the center of his Manhattan loft, adjusting his navy blazer while surveying the scene before him with practiced confidence that masked the hollow ache beneath his ribs. The space glowed with amber light from Edison bulbs strung across exposed brick walls, while a DJ spun smooth jazz remixes near the floor to ceiling windows overlooking the glittering cityscape below. Guests mingled in clusters, clutching champagne flutes, their laughter rising and falling, like waves against the low thrum of bass that vibrated through polished concrete floors. Alex had spent weeks planning this New Year's Eve party, telling himself and anyone who would listen that it symbolized a fresh start after 6 months of rebuilding his life piece by piece, following the explosive end of his relationship with Emily Carter. She had been everything chaos and creativity, wrapped in sharp intelligence and sharper words, a journalist who challenged him at every turn until their final fight shattered whatever fragile foundation they had built together. Now he was supposed to be moving forward dating casually, keeping things light with Sarah Mitchell, a sweet marketing executive who stood near the bar in a tasteful black dress, laughing at something his colleague Jake was saying. But 3 glasses of whiskey had loosened something reckless in Alex's chest as midnight approached, and he found himself pulling out his phone, scrolling to Emily's contact with fingers that trembled slightly from alcohol and audacity. He typed out a message dripping with sarcasm that felt satisfying in the moment, like scratching an old wound just to remember it still existed. Big party tonight at the loft. If you're not too busy saving the world with your hard-hitting journalism, feel free to stop by and remind me why we're better off apart. He hit send before second-guessing himself, then shoved the phone deep in his pocket and rejoined his guest with a grin that felt more like armor than joy. 2 hours passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles while Alex tried to ignore the way his phone felt like a burning coal against his thigh. Sarah touched his arm, asking if he wanted to step outside for air, but before he could answer, the elevator doors across the room slid open with a soft chime. Time seemed to fracture into slow motion as Emily Carter stepped into his loft, wearing a red dress that caught every light like liquid fire, her dark hair falling in waves over bare shoulders. The room didn't actually go silent, but it felt that way to Alex as conversations faltered and heads turned, tracking her movement through the crowd with magnetic attention. Emily's eyes found his across the space, holding his gaze with an intensity that made his breath catch sharp and sudden in his throat. She smiled, then not warm, but dangerous, like a challenge wrapped in crimson silk. Shocked expression. Alex felt his heart hammering against his ribs as Emily glided through the crowd with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly what kind of chaos she was about to unleash. Sarah appeared at his elbow, her fingers curling possessively around his arm, but he barely registered the touch because every cell in his body was tracking Emily's approach like a compass finding true north. "Alex, darling," Emily said when she reached him, her voice honey, sweet with an edge sharp enough to draw blood. "I got your charming invitation and simply couldn't resist seeing what kind of fresh start you've been building without me." Her gaze flickered to Sarah with an assessment that lasted less than a second, but somehow managed to catalog and dismiss her entirely. Sarah straightened her spine, sensing the shift in atmosphere like an animal detecting a predator nearby. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending her hand with forced politeness. "Alex's girlfriend." Emily took the offered hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How lovely for you both, though. I should mention Alex has a terrible habit of leaving important details out of conversations. You might want to ask him about the Barcelona trip he promised me before." Laughing. Alex felt heat crawling up his neck as Sarah's grip on his arm tightened, with questions forming in her eyes that he definitely didn't want to answer right now. "Emily, what are you doing here?" he managed to ask, though his voice came out rougher than intended, betraying emotions he thought he'd buried months ago. She tilted her head, studying him with those green eyes that had always seen too much past his carefully constructed walls. "You invited me, remember, or was that just the whiskey talking? Because it certainly sounded like you wanted to see me again." Jake appeared with fresh drinks, clearly sensing drama and wanting a front row seat, while other guests pretended not to watch, while absolutely watching every moment of this collision. "That was a joke," Alex said, but the word felt flimsy and unconvincing, even to his own ears. Emily stepped closer, eliminating the safe distance between them until he could smell her perfume. jasmine and something darker that brought back memories of tangled sheets and whispered promises. You never were very good at jokes, Alex. You always said exactly what you meant, even when you pretended otherwise. Sarah released his arms suddenly, her voice tight with barely contained anger. I need some air, she announced before turning on her heel and cutting through the crowd toward the balcony. Alex knew he should follow her, should salvage whatever this thing with Sarah was supposed to be, but his feet remained rooted to the spot as Emily watched him with an expression mixing triumph and something softer underneath. Still breaking hearts, I see, she murmured, smirking expression. Part 3. The party continued swirling around them, but Alex felt trapped in a bubble where only Emily existed, her presence erasing months of carefully constructed distance in mere minutes. You didn't have to come, he said, finally finding his voice, though it came out defensive rather than casual. You could have just ignored the text like a normal person. Emily's smile faded, slightly replaced by something more genuine and infinitely more dangerous. When have I ever been normal, Alex? That's what you loved about me, until it became what you hated. The accusation hung between them, heavy with truth he wasn't ready to acknowledge, surrounded by people who knew nothing about the messy, beautiful, terrible thing they'd shared. Jake cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the tension crackling in the air. I'm going to check on the music, he mumbled before retreating with unusual speed. Alex grabbed Emily's wrist, not hard but firm enough to convey urgency. We need to talk somewhere private, not here in front of everyone. She didn't resist as he led her through the crowd toward his bedroom at the back of the loft, ignoring the curious stares and whispered speculation that followed their exit like smoke. The moment the door closed behind them, the pretense dropped from both their faces, leaving raw, honest emotion exposed in the dim light, filtering through curtains. Why did you really come? Alex demanded, leaning against the door, as if blocking her escape route, or maybe his own. Emily crossed to the window, her silhouette outlined against the city lights beyond. Because I'm tired, Alex, tired of pretending I don't miss you. Tired of dating men who don't challenge me. Tired of lying to myself that walking away was the right choice. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, betraying vulnerability she rarely showed anyone, especially him. Sad expression. Alex felt something loosening in his chest like a knot he'd been carrying for months, suddenly coming undone. We were terrible together, Emily. You said it yourself. We fought about everything, my work, your schedule, my need for stability, your need for chaos. She turned to face him, eyes shining with unshed tears that made his throat tight. We were terrible together because we were both too stubborn to compromise, too scared to admit we needed each other more than we needed to be right. He crossed the room in 3 strides, closing the distance between them, with hands that shook slightly as they framed her face. I sent that text because I wanted you to care enough to respond, even if it was just to tell me to go to hell. Emily's laugh came out watery and broken. I care, Alex. I never stopped caring. That's the problem. Outside the bedroom door, the party reached a fever pitch as the countdown to midnight began, voices rising in anticipation, while Alex and Emily stood frozen in a moment that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. What do we do now? He whispered. She reached up, covering his hands with hers. We decide if we're brave enough to try again, or if we let this night be just another beautiful mistake. Tearful expression. The countdown echoed through the walls: 10, 9, 8, and Alex felt every number like a heartbeat pushing him toward a decision that would define everything that came after this moment. Emily's eyes searched his face, looking for an answer he wasn't sure he could give, because choosing her meant choosing uncertainty, meant abandoning the safe, predictable life he'd been building with Sarah and everyone else who fit neatly into boxes. 7, 6, 5. And he thought about all the nights he'd lain awake, replaying their arguments, wondering if one different word, one softer tone could have changed the trajectory of their destruction. I've been seeing Sarah for 3 months, he said, pulling back slightly, creating space that felt both necessary and agonizing. She's stable, kind, everything you and I weren't. 4, 3, 2, and Emily's expression shifted from hopeful to guarded, her walls slamming back into place with practiced efficiency. Then why am I standing in your bedroom, Alex? Why did you text me? Why are you looking at me like I'm the only person in the world who matters? One in the room beyond erupted in cheers and celebration as midnight struck, ushering in a new year that suddenly felt heavy with impossible choices. Alex stepped back, running hands through his hair, frustration and longing warring in his chest. Because I'm selfish, because I can't let you go, even though I should. Because seeing you tonight reminded me that safe and stable feels like slowly dying inside. Frustrated expression. Emily flinched at the raw honesty, wrapping her arms around herself, as if holding pieces together. I didn't come here to be your crisis, Alex. I came because I thought maybe we'd both grown enough to make it work this time, but I won't be your midnight confession that you regret in the morning. She moved toward the door, but he caught her hand, desperation making him bold. Wait, please, just wait. For what? She demanded, voice rising with emotion. For you to figure out if I'm worth the risk while some other woman waits for you outside. For you to keep me in this limbo where I'm always the chaos you want, but never the stability you choose. The words hit like physical blows because she was right, had always been right about his tendency to want her fire while craving someone else's calm. A sharp knock interrupted them, and Sarah's voice came through, tight with barely controlled anger. Alex, we need to talk now. Emily pulled her hand free, straightening her spine with dignity that made his chest ache. Go handle your responsibility, Alex. That's what you're good at, doing the right thing, even when your heart wants something different. She opened the door before he could respond, slipping past a furious Sarah with a grace that somehow made the situation worse. Sarah entered, shutting the door with controlled force. What exactly is going on? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you invited your ex to our party so you could have some dramatic reunion. Angry expression. Alex wanted to deny it, but the truth sat heavy on his tongue, refusing to be dressed up in polite lies. It wasn't supposed to be our party, Sarah. It was my party, and I didn't think she'd actually come. But you wanted her to, Sarah said, and it wasn't a question. Part 5. The silence that followed Sarah's accusation felt suffocating as Alex struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like excuses, even though that's exactly what they would be. I don't know what I wanted, he finally admitted, defeat creeping into his voice. I've been trying so hard to move forward to build something healthy and stable with you, but seeing Emily tonight made me realize I've just been going through motions. Sarah's face crumpled slightly before she caught herself rebuilding composure with visible effort. So I'm what exactly? A placeholder while you figure out your feelings for a woman you claim to be over. The hurt in her voice made guilt twist in his stomach because she deserved better than this half-hearted relationship built on his fear of being alone rather than genuine connection. You're an amazing person, Sarah. Kind, patient, everything most men would be lucky to have, but I can't keep pretending I'm all in when part of me is still. Still in love with her, Sarah finished the sentence. He couldn't voice, wiping away a tear that escaped despite her best efforts. You know what's sad, Alex? I already knew. I saw the way you looked at your phone sometimes, like you were waiting for a message that never came. Crying. She moved to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. I hope she's worth it. I hope whatever fire you think she brings is worth burning down everything stable in your life, because that's what's going to happen. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Alex alone in the bedroom, while party sounds filtered through walls that suddenly felt paper thin. He found Emily on the balcony 20 minutes later, after searching through thinning crowds of guests who were beginning to drift home. She stood at the railing, staring at the Manhattan skyline, with her arms wrapped tight against the January cold. Sarah left, he said, joining her at the railing, close enough to touch, but not quite touching. Emily didn't turn. I figured as much when I saw her storm out. I'm sorry, Alex. I didn't come here to ruin your relationship. You didn't ruin anything, he replied, voice steady with newfound certainty. I did by inviting you, by not being honest with Sarah or myself about what I really wanted. Now she looked at him, eyes searching his face in the ambient city glow. And what do you want, Alex? Because I need to hear you say it clearly. No more games or mixed signals. He took her hand, feeling her fingers cold against his palm. I want you, Emily. I want the chaos and the challenges and the fights that make us better. I want to stop playing it safe and actually live with someone who makes me feel alive. Emily's breath caught her walls finally crumbling. I want that too, but we have to do better this time. We have to actually communicate instead of letting resentment build. We have to choose each other even when it's hard. Crying with joy. Alex pulled her close, kissing her as fireworks exploded somewhere in the distance, painting the sky in colors that matched the hope blooming in his chest. The party continued inside, but out here on the balcony overlooking a city of infinite possibilities, they found their second chance built not on the ashes of who they'd been, but on the promise of who they could become together. Below them, the streets teemed with people celebrating new beginnings, unaware that high above them, two souls were writing their own fresh start, one honest conversation at a time, proving that sometimes the greatest risk is also the greatest reward. What we learn from this story is that true love requires courage to be vulnerable and honest rather than hiding behind safe choices that leave us unfulfilled, while selfishness, like Alex's impulsive text and emotional games, causes pain to innocent people caught in the crossfire. Teaching us that real connection demands we face our fears, communicate openly, and choose growth over comfort, even when it means admitting our mistakes and taking responsibility for the hearts we've touched along the way. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.